The completion of a standard gauge railway in 1961 between Albury and Melbourne marked the commencement of an unbroken journey for fast freight and passenger services between Sydney and Melbourne. The tremendous growth of the population and the development of large industries has highlighted the importance of railways as a transportation medium with its speedy, efficient service. Interstate transport has been hampered by a multiplicity of rail gauges due to each colony developing its railway. A uniform gauge was considered desirable, but agreement could not be reached. This resulted in additional handling costs in meeting transshipping requirements at change of gauge stations. In the early days of the colony, it was realized that the development of the country would be dependent on railways. The need to link the various systems soon became imperative, but as the railways extended from the seaboard over rugged and mountainous country, many difficulties had to be overcome. By 1873, the Victorian line had reached Wodonga, while the New South Wales line had reached Goulburn. And 8 years later was completed to Albury. The linking of the two systems was paramount in the minds of the planners, and the urgency of the matter was clearly demonstrated in the provision of a temporary timber bridge over the Murray River while the permanent bridge was under construction. For 2 years, passengers were conveyed to Wodonga by horse-drawn bus from Albury. And in 1883, the union of the two systems occurred when the first train from Melbourne arrived at Albury. Special trains arrived from Sydney, and the event was hailed as the first step towards federation. Passengers for some time transshipped either at Albury or Wodonga, while goods were handled only at Albury, as the temporary bridge and later the permanent bridge accommodated both gauges. With the individual development of railways by the various colonies, gauges from 3'6" to 5'3" resulted, a problem with which we are still faced. The creation of the Commonwealth resulted in the building of the Transcontinental Railway some years later. A 4'8½" gauge was used. Over the intervening years, the volume of traffic increased and accentuated the problem created by the broken gauge, transshipping. At Albury, 770,000 tons of freight had to be transshipped in the 12 months prior to the unification of gauges. This represented the equivalent of approximately 100 wagons daily. In addition, transshipping is necessary at Tocumwal, Oaklands, Broken Hill, and Wallangarra. Albury is the largest transshipping station in New South Wales. An average of 300 employees were engaged exclusively on this work before completion of the standard gauge line to Melbourne. And despite the use of modern handling equipment, the problem of transshipping remained a major one. All classes of goods were handled, from small packages to motor cars and wagon loads of steel. During the Second World War, the transshipping problem was accentuated. A tremendous strain was placed on the resources of the railways as the quick movement of troops and equipment was essential to the nation's war effort. The bottleneck at Albury, as well as other transshipping stations in New South Wales, resulted in losses in freight of millions of pounds to the railways. Passengers were inconvenienced. A change of trains was necessary to enable them to complete their interstate journey. Break of gauge also restricted the operations of these services between Sydney and Melbourne. Early arrival times at Melbourne could not be arranged, as it was not desirable to schedule trains to arrive at Albury too early in the morning. In 1957, following an investigation by a federal parliamentary committee, a scheme was prepared for the standardization of the three most urgent links. The first stage was the construction of a 4'8½" gauge line between Albury and Melbourne, completed in 4 years. The first direct passenger train left Sydney for Melbourne on the 12th of April, 1962. And to commemorate this historic occasion, the New South Wales Railways Commissioner, Mr. McCusker, was host to a distinguished gathering at a celebration dinner held in Sydney a few hours before the departure of the train. Present at the gathering were His Excellency the Governor-General, the Prime Minister and the Premiers of New South Wales and Victoria. After welcoming the guests, Mr. McCusker outlined briefly the history of railway gauges in the Australian colonies. He pointed out that in the haste to build railways, the matter of gauges was not viewed in the light of Australia's future as a nation, the ultimate result being a tangled skein of dissimilar gauges spread across the continent. Mr. McCusker expressed the opinion that it was fortunate the Commonwealth Government in 1917 built the Transcontinental Railway to standard gauge. He said that the Sydney-Melbourne standard gauge line was a monument to modern political enlightenment, resulting in the Commonwealth, Victorian and New South Wales governments combining to make a reality of this great enterprise. In conclusion, he said,
"We are immensely proud of the event which we are met here this evening to commemorate. It is fulfillment of a grand design that cannot fail but further stimulate trade between the two states whose nations it brings closer together. It becomes to the nation in time of peril a great strategic link and must work to bind the peoples of Australia into a closer knit and more prosperous federation."
The Prime Minister referred to the unification between Sydney and Melbourne as one of the historic landmarks in the development of Australian transport. He said anything that increases, improves and quickens the means of communication between what were once the 6 colonies was a magnificent thing for the Australian nation. The Premier of New South Wales paid tribute to the people associated with the building of the standard gauge line and said present-day trains provided a system of freight carrying which was far more efficient than anything known here before. His Excellency the Governor-General referred to the fact competition from other forms of transport had not made railways redundant. They still hold, as they have held for more than 100 years, an indispensable place in a modern and expanding economy. Concluding, His Excellency said,
"I have been entrusted by the Chief Commissioner, and no doubt by his big colleague, with announcing the name of the train on which we are about to travel. The name is the Southern Aurora.
At Sydney Terminal Station, the Southern Aurora was ready to depart from one of the platforms which had been modernised and extended to 1,215 feet to accommodate the long new trains. This work was the first phase of an extensive modernisation plan which includes a fully air-conditioned contemporary booking hall and passenger lounge, a centralised information centre and new ticket-issuing machines. In addition, there will be a new contemporary restaurant, coffee lounge and post office. Luggage will be handled on a conveyor belt system. The Governor-General, after meeting the train crew, inspected the locomotives which would haul the Southern Aurora on the first direct passenger journey from Sydney to Melbourne. And its departure on this historic occasion heralded a new era in modern train travel. The heavy grades on the run to Albury necessitate the use of 2 powerful 1,800 horsepower diesel locomotives to haul the 14 cars of this new train, which in appointments and luxury is among the most modern in the world. Comprising a deluxe suite, twinettes and roomettes, it accommodates 198 passengers. A feature of all compartments is the under-carpet electric heating elements and soundproof insulation. In addition, there is a club car and dining car with kitchen. A power van provides electrical energy for lighting and air conditioning. At Albury, 400 miles from Sydney and the pleasant surroundings of the Murray River, the scene was reminiscent of 1881 when the first train arrived from Sydney. On this occasion, however, with speeds up to 70 miles per hour, the Southern Aurora completed the journey to Albury in 9 hours. A quick change of diesel locomotives and the journey to Melbourne was continued. Crossing the Murray River, the border between New South Wales and Victoria, the Southern Aurora proceeded along the existing standard gauge line to Wodonga, the commencing point of the new standard gauge line. With the breaking of the ceremonial barrier, the line was officially open and the Southern Aurora continued on its way. Mr. W.C. Wentworth, chairman of the Federal Government Rail Standardization Committee, showed keen interest in the modern kitchen where the preparation of appetizing meals is carried out by the chef and his staff. As the Southern Aurora approached Melbourne, crowds gathered at all vantage points to give a welcome to this first direct passenger train from Sydney. After winding its way over the North Melbourne flyover, one of the major projects of the construction of the standard gauge line, the Southern Aurora arrived at Spencer Street Railway Terminal, where it was welcomed enthusiastically. Three months prior to the introduction of passenger services, a ceremony at the Alexandria Goods Terminal, New South Wales, marked the commencement of direct interstate freight services between Sydney and Melbourne. the wide variety of rolling stock enables rail transport to achieve a degree of flexibility which cannot be matched by other means of land-based transport. With its freight services, the inherent benefits of a standard gauge railway show to best advantage, with high sustained speeds over long distance hauls and the economies possible by the utilization of full wagon load schedules. The railways are therefore able to offer the lowest ton-mile rate for freight carried, resulting in a beneficial effect on Australia's high transport bill. Regular day and night services in air-conditioned trains now operate between Sydney and Melbourne over the standard gauge line. The Southern Aurora provides accommodation exclusively for sleeping berth passengers and includes a deluxe suite, roomettes and twinettes. In the twinette, the many modern features include foam rubber mattresses, reading lamps, wall-to-wall carpeting, a power outlet for electric shavers and individual hot and cold showers. The deluxe suite is in effect a luxurious bed sitting room, complete with armchairs and in addition to the normal twinette appointments, has a vanity table and chair. Indirect lighting is a feature of the attractive dining car. Meals up to 5 courses are available and 48 persons can be accommodated in one sitting. Guests too may share a farewell meal from 7 p.m, an hour before departure time. In the club lounge, drinks and light refreshments are available. This car is equipped with coffee and hot water urns, refrigeration cabinets for cooling drinks and preparing ice cubes, and a conveniently situated all-electric range. A writing table is provided for the convenience of passengers. For almost a quarter of a century, the Spirit of Progress operated between Albury and Melbourne to convey passengers to and from the Melbourne Limited Express. With the changeover to modern standard gauge bogies, this train now runs direct between Sydney and Melbourne as the second division of the Southern Aurora. It provides for both sleeping and sitting passengers. The Intercapital Daylight Express, which had been operating between Sydney and Albury since 1956, now completes the journey to Melbourne. It provides a service for people who prefer the scenic attraction of the journey or for those who do not desire to undertake interstate night travel. The standard gauge line between Albury and Melbourne is 189 miles long and includes some substantial engineering features. To avoid congestion of the suburban services, it proceeds via Sunshine and Albion to Broadmeadows. At North Melbourne, a flyover to span 20 tracks was provided to accommodate the standard gauge track. The line passes through the interstate freight terminal at South Dynon, and between South Dynon and West Footscray, a distance of some 3 miles, the existing tracks were converted to dual gauge by the provision of a third rail, similar to that used at the Spencer Street terminal. Gauges then separate by a unique crossover arrangement. Between Albion and Jacana, one of the 2 goods roads was converted to standard gauge. Chicana, a flyover carries the standard gauge line to the eastern side of the broad gauge track. It then remains on the eastern side of the regular broad gauge line to Albury. The new standard gauge line is a single track with 15 3,000-foot crossing loops provided at selected locations to give sufficient capacity for present and future needs. And the movement of all traffic between West Footscray and Wodonga is controlled from the centralised traffic control panel in Melbourne. Typical examples of these crossing loops are at Somerton, where the up passenger platform was removed to provide for the standard gauge main line and crossing loop, and at Tullamarine. At Wallen, the standard gauge line and crossing loop swing out approximately 300 feet from the broad gauge line to provide easy curves. Many bridges have been duplicated and the steelwork required was fabricated at the New South Wales Railway workshops. The longest bridge duplicated spans the Broken River at Benalla. This bridge is nearly 800 feet long and consists of 16 42-foot spans in addition to two 63-foot plate web girders which were necessary to span the river. In all, 230 tons of steelwork and 2,000 cubic yards of concrete were required. To cross the Ovens River at Wangaratta, 14 42-foot spans and two 63-foot plate web girders were used. This bridge, together with the one over the Broken River at Benalla, were the only ones where fabricated plate web girders were used to span the river openings. At Seymour, the cost of building additional bridges over the Goulburn River and adjacent low-lying areas was avoided by the conversion of one of the broad gauge tracks to standard gauge for a distance of almost a mile. At Wangaratta, a long cutting was excavated for the standard gauge line to maintain suitable access to the busy station. Between Chiltern and Wodonga, the Hume Highway crossed the railway line 4 times. These crossings were eliminated by the construction of road bypasses. A number of level crossings, including all those on the Hume Highway, were eliminated by the provision of under and overpasses. Those at Albion, where the overpass consists of 2 separate bridge structures, Sunshine, and Craigieburn were among the major crossings eliminated. At Wodonga, on the southern bank of the Murray River, the existing standard gauge line was relocated to avoid crossing the broad gauge line twice. Thus, the first phase in the National Standardization Plan was completed, linking Sydney and Melbourne with a direct through service on a line of uniform gauge. Diesel locomotives hauling modern passenger trains now travel the 600 miles between these 2 capital cities in 13 hours, while freight trains with loads up to 2,000 tons are able to complete the journey in 16 hours. As the railways before the coming of the motor vehicle and aeroplane opened up for development the various colonies of Australia, so these same railways operating over a uniform gauge will do much to bind the ties of federation even closer. The completion of the standard gauge line to Melbourne has given great satisfaction to all railwaymen throughout the Commonwealth. And in expressing their gratification, the New South Wales Commissioner, Mr. McCusker, said,
They see in this act of standardization the first fruit of a bold and imaginative blueprint which has as its ultimate objective the linking of the continent from Perth to South Brisbane by standard gauge.